headlines of the century. Dateline India, August 15, 1947. In a moment, the story. India's battle for independence from the British Empire had been a pressing problem since the early years of the 20th century. Mohandas K. Gandhi, spiritual leader of millions of Hindus, had waged a passive war for several decades before the negotiations were to take a favorable trend. At the conclusion of World War II, Great Britain offered an autonomous state of existence to all of India, leaving the door open for complete independence later. Gandhi and his protege Nehru met with the English delegation and declared that such a situation would be unsatisfactory. They demanded complete withdrawal of all British control. Then on March 14, 1946, England offered complete independence. The years of unrest could now be brought to a close, but the problems facing such a course were many. The Asian country for centuries had been divided into two major religious groups, the Hindus and the Muslims. Now that complete freedom was within their grasp, the two religious philosophies clashed violently. Muhammad Ali Jinnah, head of the powerful Muslim League, argued for a separate Muslim state of Pakistan. Great Britain had vetoed the partitioning at first as being completely unfeasible, but the threat of uncontrolled civil war forced Prime Minister Attlee's government to reverse the official thinking on the matter. February 20th, 1947, found Lord Mountbatten, a staunch advocate of partitioning, replacing Lord Wavell as the Viceroy of India. At the same time, in separate assemblies, the Muslim League and the Hindu Confederation finally accepted the British offer of independence of the two separate states of India and Pakistan. August 15, 1947, found the partitioning going into effect. Almost 2 million people had to be evacuated from one state to the other, as the partitioning line found Muslims living in the Hindu state and Hindus residing in the new Muslim state. Hungry and homeless refugees set up housekeeping in the streets of the major cities. Bewildered, they waited helplessly for someone to take care of them. Violence flared up over the partitioning in both India and Pakistan. Traditional, centuries-old hatred between the two major faiths brought to a boil this dissension over the new boundaries and took a toll of countless lives. Although Pakistan had chosen complete independence from Britain, India chose complete sovereignty, with the symbolic retention of the king as a trademark of the free association of the Commonwealth members. The new Indian president, Rajendra Prasad, solemnly took his oath of office. To him and his Prime Minister Nehru now fell the unenvious task of leading their nation through the bramble-strewn path that lay ahead. India had received its long-sought independence, but it knew too well that the problem of retaining its freedom and healing its fierce domestic rifts would prove a larger battle still.
In March 1947, Earl Louis Mountbatten and his wife Edwina arrive in New Delhi. The great-grandson of Queen Victoria and second cousin to George VI, Mountbatten brings a regal presence to the drama of India's independence. As the last viceroy, he bears responsibility for India's fate.
2nd of April, 1947. I have now completed my first week in office. I should like to be able to paint an encouraging picture of my first impressions, but feel it would be misleading if I did so. The scene here is one of unrelieved gloom. At this early stage, I can see little common ground on which to build any agreed solution for the future of India. The only conclusion I have been able to come to is that unless I act quickly, I may well find the real beginnings of a civil war on my hands.
By May, attempts to create a unified India have failed. Gandhi retreats from political life. Muhammad Ali Jinnah, leader of the Muslim League, and Jawaharlal Nehru of the Indian National Congress concede to divide India. Fearing a total loss of control, Mountbatten brings forward the transfer of power to August. Two nations will be created by partition, a secular India and a new homeland for India's Muslims, Pakistan. Nehru addresses the people of India.
Long years ago, we made a tryst with destiny, and now the time comes when we shall redeem our pledge. At the stroke of the midnight hour, when the world sleeps, India will awake to life and freedom.
The 15th of August, 1947. The British Empire in India has come to an end. The last Viceroy, Louis Mountbatten.
The flag raising and the salute were done amid scenes of the most fantastic rejoicing. And as the flag broke, a brilliant rainbow appeared in the sky, which was taken by the crowd as a good omen.
Qasim Muhammad.
On the 15th of August came freedom. The freedom to burn, loot and murder. While Delhi and Karachi were celebrating, central Punjab was burning.
Between August 1947 and March 1948, 4.5 million Hindus and Sikhs are forced to migrate from Pakistan to India. 6 million Muslims must move in the opposite direction. Britons and Indians witness the bloodshed. Shahid Ahmed.
It is a battleground. People have gone mad. Trains to Pakistan are being looted and occupants slaughtered. We all knew that carnage was in the offing. So did Mountbatten. The British Empire, which tried to build India over centuries, can never live down this great tragedy.
Lieutenant Colonel Hubert Boyd Hudson.
The sight from the air was awe-inspiring. In this chaos, millions of refugees were struggling to get to India or Pakistan. Thousands of others were doing their best to prevent them, murdering them by the hundred. But death is nothing. There are things more terrible than death.
Ten million people are displaced in the partition of India. 1 million are dead. By the summer of 1948, most of the British have left. Hubert Boyd Hudson has been in India for 15 years.
India is full of ghosts. Houses I have lived in, now inhabited by Indians, remind me of the days which will never come again. When the Viceroy drove past with a cavalry escort in red coats, I have seen the greatness of the British in India, but now it is all ended, and we are the last to leave, the few who are trying to tidy up the mess which the sudden splitting of an old empire has caused.
Britain has lost its greatest imperial possession. Mahatma Gandhi once said that if India became free, the rest of the empire would follow. In the next 10 years, the fire of India's independence will spread around the globe, from the Middle East to Africa.
photo of the Indian Army troops marching into Goa in December 1961. What followed was the historic liberation of Goa from 450 years of Portuguese rule. Whenever we remember India's struggle for freedom, it is almost always in context of the British colonization. We often forget that there were parts of the subcontinent under a different European power, one that was the first to arrive in India in 1498, when Vasco da Gama sailed into Calicut, and the last to leave. While the rest of the country was leading marches against the British, residents of Diu, Daman, Dadra and Nagar Haveli, Goa and Anjediva Islands were protesting against the Portuguese. In Goa, the independence movement gained momentum in the early 20th century. The abolition of the Portuguese monarchy in 1910 raised hopes that the colonies would be granted self-determination. However, when Portugal's brutal colonial policies remained unchanged, an organized and dedicated anti-colonial movement emerged. One of the first persons to call for an independent Goa was journalist Luís de Menezes Bragança. He co-founded Goa's first Portuguese daily, O Heraldo, and through his writings, created political consciousness among his fellow Goans. As a reaction to growing dissent, the Portuguese government curtailed civil liberties, including censorship of the press and public gathering. A new act, Acto Colonial, was also brought into effect, which effectively made Goans second-class citizens in the Portuguese Empire. But in 1946, freedom fighters Julião Menzies and Ram Manohar Lohia openly defied government orders and addressed a public meeting in Goa where they called for a revolution. At the forefront of Goa's freedom movement was Luís de Menezes Bragança's brother-in-law, Dr. Tristão de Bragança Cunha, who is also known as the father of Goan nationalism. He staunchly opposed colonial rule. Dr. Tristão was court-martialed and imprisoned, first at Fort Aguada in Goa and then in the Peniche fortress in Portugal. After his release from prison in 1954, Dr. Tristão was moved to Bombay and set up the Goa Action Committee in the city as an umbrella body to coordinate the Goan freedom movement. Meanwhile, Indian revolutions kept crossing the Goa border and raising the Indian flag as a form of symbolic protest. For example, in 1954, a few protesters overpowered Portuguese soldiers, planted the Indian tricolour at Fort Tiracol, and managed to keep it flying for 22 hours. Soon, proponents of Goa's freedom from outside Goa tried to enter Goa to launch satyagraha campaigns. The first such batch was led by Maharashtrian freedom fighter Senapati Bapat, but the Portuguese had blocked all entry points and the protesters were lathi-charged and imprisoned. Between 1955 and 61, the Indian government adopted a wait-and-watch approach with numerous representations to the Portuguese Prime Minister António de Oliveira Salazar. But with no end to the stalemate in sight, in 1961, Indian Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru said the time had come to consider afresh what method should be adopted to free Goa from Portuguese rule. And thus, the Indian government launched Operation Vijay in December 1961, a military operation for the liberation of Goa. The Portuguese had already anticipated this, and while the Indian army was preparing to storm Goa, the Portuguese were preparing to take their assets out of the territory. Gold deposited by the Goans and the Goa branch of the Portuguese bank, Banco Nacional Ultramarino, was shipped off to Lisbon. They were also planning to transport the casket containing the relics of Saint Francis Xavier to Portugal. To prevent the Indian army from entering Goa, bridges were blown up. But the Indian military not only used land forces to attack the Portuguese, it also deployed the Navy and the Air Force. Indian forces under General Sagat Singh were airdropped into Panjim, where they swiftly took control of the capital. Vastly outnumbered and overpowered, within 36 hours of fighting, Governor-General Vassallo A. Silva, defying Salazar's orders, signed the instrument of surrender on 19th of December 1961. Thus swiftly and dramatically, over 4 centuries of Portuguese rule in India came to an end. This is a photo of the Bhabha Atomic Research Center, or BARC, taken by a US satellite in 1966, 12 years after the facility was set up in Trombay near Mumbai. By the time this picture was taken, India was in the process of making its own nuclear reactor and power plant. The setting up of BARC set the ball rolling on India's nuclear program, a program that was so efficient and so ambitious that within 2 decades in 1974, India conducted its first successful nuclear test at Pokhran. It made India the first confirmed nuclear nation outside the 5 permanent members of the United Nations Security Council. It was not just its tremendous military potential, but also the socio-economic benefits of nuclear energy that led India to set up an atomic facility. And it was all thanks to a young, visionary physicist called Homi Jahangir Bhabha. When Bhabha was studying for his PhD in physics at Cambridge University in the 1930s, he had visited some of the most advanced laboratories in Europe. He had also met scientists who went on to play an important role in the Manhattan Project, which led to America making its first atomic bombs during the Second World War. Later, in 1944, Bhabha, then a professor at the Indian Institute of Science in Bangalore, wrote to the Sir Dorabji Tata Trust, drawing attention to the need for an institute in India where original research in mathematics and the sciences could be conducted. There is at the moment in India no big school of research in the fundamental problems of physics, both theoretical and experimental. There are, however, scattered all over India competent workers who are not doing as good work as they would if brought together in one place under proper direction. Bhabha further stressed the need for indigenous development of scientific resources and training for India's benefit. When nuclear energy has been successfully applied for power production in, say, a couple of decades from now, India will not have to look abroad for its experts, but will find them ready at hand. Bhabha's call was answered and the Tata Institute of Fundamental Research was set up in 1945. In a few years, TIFR was designated to be the center for all large-scale projects in nuclear research. But Bhabha realized that TIFR would not be able to accommodate research infrastructure in multiple fields, and that technology development for the atomic energy program needed a laboratory devoted to this purpose. He raised this with his close friend, who was also the Prime Minister, Jawaharlal Nehru. Nehru's thoughts aligned with Bhabha's, that science was important for a modern state. This was a time when atomic energy was at the frontier of science, and both men realized that it was crucial for India to be self-reliant in the fields of nuclear science and engineering. Thus, the government of India acquired 1,200 acres of land at Trombay and set up the Atomic Energy Establishment on the 3rd of January 1954. This was renamed the Bhabha Atomic Research Center or BARC in 1967 following Bhabha's untimely death in a plane crash. A complex full of laboratories, reactors and processing plants were built here. All scientists and engineers engaged in the fields of reactor designing and development, instrumentation, metallurgy and material science were transferred with their respective programs from TIFR to BARC, with TIFR retaining its original focus on fundamental research in the sciences. BARC brought India into the nuclear age, and since its beginnings in 1954, India's premier nuclear research facility has gone on to do groundbreaking work. From indigenously developing nuclear reactors for electricity generation to the application of radiation in agriculture and medicine to computer modeling, BARC continues to be a jewel of Indian science.
6 months after Bangladesh was born, on the 2nd of July 1972, Indira Gandhi and Pakistan's Zulfikar Ali Bhutto signed the Simla Agreement, an event that became a milestone in India's modern history. Under the agreement, India agreed to release 93,000 Pakistani soldiers taken as prisoners of war after taking the consent of Bangladesh leader Sheikh Mujibur Rahman. It also agreed to return the 5,000 square miles of Pakistan's territory it had captured during the war. While this closed the chapter on the Bangladesh war, the Simla Agreement is significant for two other decisions that were taken. First, the two countries agreed to convert the UN-sponsored ceasefire line of 1948 into a line of control or LOC. They said they would uphold the inviolability of the LOC in the interest of durable peace. Second, India and Pakistan resolved to settle all disputes through bilateral talks and other means, ruling out third-party mediation. The Simla Agreement thus buried Pakistan's insistence on finding a solution to the Kashmir problem through UN mediation or by involving global powers. The Kashmir issue had been discussed by the UN Security Council for the first time on the 1st of January 1948 at India's request after Pakistan sent tribal raiders to capture Kashmir. On the 5th of January 1949, the Security Council passed a resolution urging India and Pakistan to create a mechanism to hold a free and impartial plebiscite in Kashmir. Pakistan was called upon to withdraw from the areas it had occupied in 1947 as a condition of holding the plebiscite. That never happened. Ever since, India had struggled to stop world leaders from meddling in Kashmir's affairs. The Simla Agreement, inked by Indira Gandhi on behalf of India, drew flack from a section of political leaders and strategic experts. Immediately, questions were asked about why India had squandered an opportunity to leverage India's position of strength after the victory in negotiations with Pakistan. Why didn't Indira compel Pakistan to sign an agreement for permanent settlement of the vexed Kashmir dispute? Why did she accept Bhutto's verbal assurance to recognize the LOC as a mutually agreed upon boundary at a later date? After all, Indira had a bargaining chip of 93,000 Pakistani soldiers and vast territory in India's possession. According to journalist Inder Malhotra, Indira's topmost concern after the war ended was the safe return of Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, who had been sentenced to death in a hasty trial by Pakistan. In an interview to the New York Times dated 17th January 1972, Mujib had said that the order for his execution had been given in the final hours of the India-Pakistan war by Pakistani President Yahya Khan. However, Bhutto saved him as he realized the uproar it would create, and Mujib returned to Bangladesh on the 10th of January 1972. Indira's other concern was recognition of Bangladesh by Pakistan and other countries. Writing about the Simla summit, Catherine Frank, Indira Gandhi's biographer, says that all through the 5-day Indo-Pak talks in Simla, there was a visible discomfort between Indira and Bhutto. The discussions were held in a tense atmosphere, with India insisting on a final solution to the Kashmir problem and Pakistan focused on securing the release of its prisoners of war and lost territory. The talks reached a deadlock on the last day, that is the 2nd of July, with no sign of an agreement. But that night, as the closing banquet was about to begin at the governor's residence, Bhutto suggested a one-on-one meeting with Indira. Taking up the Kashmir problem, Indira said that converting the UN-sponsored 1948 ceasefire line into an international boundary in Kashmir would be a win-win situation for both countries. While Bhutto felt that this would weaken his position in Pakistan, he agreed with the idea of recognizing the LOC as the international boundary and promised to implement it later. But he said he simply couldn't put it in writing. The agreement was in line with P.N. Haksar's thinking. As Indira's key strategist, Haksar believed that the Simla summit should not be viewed as a negotiation between victor and vanquished. He pointed to the Treaty of Versailles after the First World War, where Allied powers had forced their will on a defeated Germany, and this had led to the rise of Hitler and Nazism. Indira and Bhutto signed the Simla agreement at 12:40 a.m. But Bhutto went back on his word to recognize the LOC. After assuming power as Prime Minister in 1973, he talked about starting a 1,000-year war against India over Kashmir. Indira had learned from the Treaty of Versailles and did not impose humiliating terms of peace on a defeated nation. But Bhutto and Pakistan had discarded the hard lessons of Bangladesh. On Kashmir, Pakistan has honored the Simla agreement more in breach than in observance, and argues that a bilateral agreement cannot supersede a UN resolution. President Fakhruddin Ali Ahmad received a top-secret letter from Prime Minister Indira Gandhi around midnight on 25th of June 1975, requesting a proclamation of emergency. Given the urgency of the matter, Indira had said in the letter that there was no time to consult the cabinet. But even before the President could consult constitutional experts, Indira's private secretary, R.K. Dhawan, arrived at the President's house with a draft proclamation of the emergency. The President signed on the dotted line. When they woke up on the 26th of June, the people of India had lost their constitutional rights and liberties. Their cherished democracy had been crushed. In a pre-dawn nationwide swoop, dozens of opposition leaders like Jayaprakash Narayan, Morarji Desai, Charan Singh, Atal Bihari Vajpayee, L.K. Advani and Congress dissidents led by Chandrasekhar were rounded up under two draconian laws: the Maintenance of Internal Security Act and the Defence of India Rules. George Fernandes was the only prominent opposition leader who managed to slip out of the police net. He was arrested in the Baroda dynamite case in 1976. George was charged with waging war against the state by planning to blow up railway tracks and government establishments. The iconic image of George Fernandes in shackles became a powerful metaphor of the emergency, reminding the people of the loss of their freedom. George Fernandes later fought the 1977 Lok Sabha elections from Muzaffarpur in Bihar from jail and won with a huge margin. The government also cracked down on the media to control adverse reactions to the emergency. Electricity supply to Delhi's newspapers was disconnected. Press censorship was imposed and censor officials were authorized to clear stories before newspapers were printed. After the emergency, L.K. Advani, Information and Broadcasting Minister in the Janata Party government, famously said, "When Indira Gandhi asked the media to bend, it crawled." The Indian Express and the Statesman offered a symbolic protest, leaving their front page editorial section blank on the 28th of June 1975. Well-known journalist and author Kuldeep Nayyar was also arrested. As surprising as it may sound, people initially reacted passively or even supported the emergency as trains ran on time and chaos on university campuses and on the streets ended. The crackdown on smugglers and hoarders was welcomed as prices of foodstuffs and essential commodities fell. The announcement of a 20-point program targeted at the betterment of weaker sections created a positive atmosphere. However, poor implementation of the program soon had people disillusioned. While Indira Gandhi imposed the emergency, the one person most closely associated with it, the face of the excesses that followed, was her son Sanjay Gandhi. From mid-1976 onwards, Sanjay emerged as an extra-constitutional authority. Senior ministers, chief ministers and officials courted him and carried out his orders. Those who didn't were punished. Sanjay's family planning program became a source of terror for men and women who were forced to undergo sterilization procedures. Inder Kumar Gujral, Information and Broadcasting Minister, was a victim of Sanjay's wrath for refusing to kowtow to him. Sanjay blamed Gujral, who later became Prime Minister in 1997-98, for poor coverage of Indira's rally on the 20th of June. He was replaced by Vidyacharan Shukla as INB Minister to rein in the media. Besides Shukla, Bansi Lal, R.K. Dhawan, Delhi's Lieutenant Governor Krishan Chand, Naveen Chawla and the DIG of Delhi Police, P.S. Bhinder, were Sanjay's core team. Later they were all identified as villains of the emergency by the Shah Commission, which investigated the atrocities of the 21-month-long period. The commission, which was set up in 1977, blamed Bansi Lal, who was Haryana's chief minister and later defence minister, for gross misuse of power. As chief minister, he helped Sanjay acquire land for the Maruti factory on the outskirts of Gurgaon. The DIG of police, P.S. Bhinder, was notorious at Delhi for arbitrary arrests of people who stood in Sanjay's way. He was held responsible for the police brutality and the killing of the Turkman Gate slum dwellers in Old Delhi who resisted the demolition of their houses and forcible sterilization. The police arrested and tortured Lawrence Fernandez to get him to reveal his brother George Fernandez's whereabouts. Lawrence was a physical and mental wreck long after his release from jail in 1977. P. Rajan, an engineering student in Calicut in Kerala, was arrested on suspicion of being a Naxalite and tortured to death. His body was never recovered. After rising to the pinnacle of power in 1971, Indira Gandhi found herself besieged during the JP movement. Fearing she would lose power, she decided to deliver what she called shock treatment to her political opponents. She made up her mind after she was found guilty of electoral malpractices on the 12th of June 1975. The road she chose to deliver this shock treatment led to attacking the very edifice of India, its constitution, reducing parliament to a rubber stamp, arresting opposition leaders, and gagging the media. The emergency was a dark period in India's modern history.
Context of the tensions of the 1980s hold true challenges to our countries. And all nations succeed at getting into the United States. I think the country we recognize that there have been differences between our two countries.
With leadership and high ideas, it has grown into a great power. Today, it grows in work.
That's the Indian press. So where's Shara Prasad? That's a good question there.
Something of a suspicion here that it'll go to Armanath. Indeed it has. One of the match award to Mahinda Armanath. For the second time running, collected it in the semi-final. £600 goes to Mahinda Armanath, who runs at number 3 and his 3 late wickets.
Capel, it has been a quite tremendous day, an historic day for Indian cricket. It must be the proudest day in your cricketing life.
That's right. I'm very happy. I'm happy what my team done here today.
Now, they're looking at you back home from Bombay to Calcutta. What do you want to say to all your countrymen beyond being happy?
Come here. We want to come here again next time with the same spirit, and we should do it next time as well.
Clive, as losing captain, what is your reaction to what has been an unexpected and absorbing contest?
Yeah, a lot of people might think so, but I thought that they played very well. We didn't bat as well. We bowled pretty well. I mean, if you restrict the side to 184, you expect to be there or thereabouts. But you know, we didn't bat well at all.
The innings with so many ups and downs, weren't there? It looked as if Viv Richards was going to take it away from you. About 50 for 1, and he was going like a tank, wasn't he, Captain?
Yeah, I think he went too fast, and we were happy when he was playing too fast, and we were thinking he can give us a wicket any time if he keep on playing like that, because he wasn't playing for 60 overs, he was playing for 30 overs game. Right. So a target wasn't good enough to fight, but we were just looking for a couple of wickets to come back to the game.
Dapple, what is going to happen in the Indian party tonight? Big celebrations for you both?
Well, this occasion will never come like so easy. Yes, we are going to celebrate. Drinks on the house, you can join us. We have, and we played like a winners throughout the game, throughout the series. Everybody fight for their life, and they said, we will do it.
And you must both be in agreement that the man of the match should be none other than Mohinder Amarnath. Well played.
Thanks, Peter.
Everybody was so impressed with the way you played the fast bowling when you were batting, and then, of course, these two crucial wickets. What do you want to say about the day?
Actually, no, that was the time actually we wanted a breakthrough. And when I got the first one, I think it was very good for the team. Because like Andy and Michael to fall, and the wicket was swimming about. So then Marshall got out, so we were very much in the game at that time.
Is your father over here, or will he be looking at you?
No, I think he's very much at home, so he must have been watching on the TV over there.